also saw. One of the things that I'm going to be talking about, because it was unique. Because when the hogs stormed the halls of Congress, police, for some weird reason, almost seemingly opened the doors for him. I don't know how that happened. We saw numerous images. We saw numerous images of cops basically opening up the gates. Here's a good meme from that, from Hasan_Piker, actually. Cops when dealing with left-wing protesters. Attention, African-American 5-year-old girl, please step away from the statue unless you want your other leg blown off. Cops dealing with right-wingers. Please, guys. You're making a mess. Please stop. I mean, this is literally the perfect depiction of what happened yesterday. Where there weren't really any like tear gas canisters, no projectiles being aimed directly at the heads of protesters. A lot of barricades being opened. Cops literally holding the hands of protesters and walking them down the stairs.
Thanks for helping a former chud see the light.
No eyes lost. Kind of weird. Kind of weird to consider that when we saw so much police brutality this past year in the aftermath of the Black Lives Matter protests that are in some places still ongoing. Police brutality didn't stop. As a matter of fact, it escalated. And those were legitimate grievances. Remember, folks, this administration, under the orders of Donald Trump and Bill Barr, who was the Attorney General at the time, sent federal agents, BORTAC units, which is the SWAT of ICE, basically. The SWAT unit for ICE. Into Portland, Oregon. Because a courthouse... And this was
Chad,
literally not my words. These aren't my words. This is Chad Wolf acting acting DHS Secretary Chad Wolf.
Hey, Hasan, really
in his words, there were violent graffiti on the side of the Portland Federal Courthouse. So that meant you had to send in federal agents, unmarked, in unmarked vehicles, rental vehicles, kidnapping people from the streets of Portland. Even if they weren't engaging in an act of violent graffiti, if you will, if you would want to consider graffiti to be violent ever. And yet, no such measures were taken when they knew for months, that this was going to happen.
Watching these pigs and chuds try to destroy America.
According to Sam Sachs of the DC Sentinel, the day before yesterday, Capitol Police ordered all contractors and vendors to not come to the Capitol on Wednesday. They knew exactly what was going to happen. They knew what was coming. I should clarify I don't know to what extent all vendors were told to stay home. I'm sure there were essential vendors who still had to come in, but Capitol Police absolutely made preparation by reaching out to certain vendors and telling them to stay home.
7 months of keeping a radical in a slightly more positive mindset. Thanks for the hard work, you big old himbo hassle.
Yeah, use Twitter for good news. What? I mean, that's Sam Sachs. He's a journalist. Like, do we have to go through this every time? Like, journalists break their own stories on Twitter before they finish writing it.
Forever, my boy. #fuck Trump.
It wasn't just Sam Sachs who reported on this, but Ken Klippenstein reported on this as well.
I can't wait for the Rust stream later. I recommend
yesterday,
being the Blood God's version of My Pillow guy.
That one of his sources inside of, I believe, the FBI had informed him that they were also scaling back on activities and told some of the non-essential staffers to stay home. Do with that information what you will. Okay? But what is not a secret is what we saw. What we saw once these horny maniacs stormed into the halls of Congress was cops taking photos with them, cops escorting them out, cops rarely ever using violence, which isn't necessarily a good thing anyway. Usage of violence is not a good thing. But to avoid the reality, to avoid the stark difference there in treatment between BLM protesters and the MAGA supporters is, of course, is silly to avoid. Anyway, let's get to some of the morning news that happened while I